Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's MillerKnoll Design Perspectives. We are joined today by MillerKnoll's VP of Interiors, Chris Leong, and MillerKnoll's Director of Design for Interiors, Gabriel Burkett. Today, together, they lead the global design strategy for our showrooms, for our retail spaces, for our workplace spaces, as well as exhibitions across our collective of brands, and they play a big role in how we show up. In addition, Chris is also the founding partner of an internationally recognized architecture studio and design consultancy, Leong Leong, based in New York, and is currently a visiting lecturer at Parsons School of Design. Gabriel is a licensed architect in New York and most recently worked as design director of architecture at a boutique design firm, Charlotte Hyman and Herrero. Gabriel also brings career experience as a project director at design firm Leong Leong. Chris and Gabriel, we invite you both here today to share with our audience how MillerKnoll uses the power of design to create places where people want to be. You recently led the design of our Chicago-based global flagship showroom located in Fulton Market. The space was unveiled during MillerKnoll's Design Days this past June, and our associates and our guests were able to share in a collective experience that sparked creativity and ideas. We have a theme this year, Together by Design. This is a space that is a visual and physical representation of MillerKnoll's research and planning and offers a seamless brand journey. We'd love for you to share how our research and thinking came to life while delivering a great place to work, and your thoughts on how this design might influence future MillerKnoll spaces. A note to our audience members, we'd love to hear from you along the way. Please place your thoughts and your ideas in the chat. I'll monitor this as we go. If it makes sense, I'll interrupt as we go along. If not, we'll hold a dialogue at the end of the conversation. Right now, I'd like to turn this over to Chris and to Gabriel to get us started. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here. Yeah, so as Jennifer mentioned, Gabriel and I lead the interiors team. We have actually worked together before in our previous collaboration at Leong Leong. And actually our first project together in 2014 was for the Venice Biennale, where we did the US pavilion called Office Us. And Herman Miller was the main sponsor, where we created a workspace in the pavilion. And so this is kind of all coming full circle, and we worked with Ben Watson at that time.
That was actually a great opportunity to begin thinking about sort of workplace trends, workplace strategy, and also just the history of workplace culture. And in particular, in that project, we were thinking about the ways in which the rise of the corporate architecture office actually led to proliferation of modernism worldwide. But a lot of themes from that project, I think, dovetail really closely with the history of even Herman Miller, for example, and Knoll as well. So yeah, kind of funny foundation to come full circle on.
Yeah. And so I think we wanted to kind of share a little bit of the work that we're doing on the interiors team with the showrooms and the workplace through the lens of MillerKnoll Fulton Market, which hopefully some of you have seen, or if you haven't, we'd love for you to come through Chicago and see it. But kind of putting it into context, I mean, this idea of Together by Design, which was the theme of Design Days this year, kind of means like multiple things for us. We both come from the A&D world, and I started a year ago. Gabriel started 6 months ago. And for us, this idea of Together by Design and working with MillerKnoll is really, it's both a kind of, it's both internal and external. We're designing the workspaces for ourselves, which we'll show you, and also kind of designing with others and actually for the A&D community, ultimately, all the products that we develop, how they live in the world. So it's both kind of, like us looking within, but also kind of looking out. And actually, we're curious on this call to hear your thoughts and hear what you're kind of seeing in kind of a workplace that you think is relevant. So I'll just kind of get it going. We'll do a little presentation and we can have a little dialogue, but definitely pop your questions in the chat. So, as you know, MillerKnoll kind of merged about 4 years ago, but it's really built off of this legacy of, over 100 years of these two key brands of Herman Miller and Knoll, but also many other brands in this brand collective. And so over the past 4 years, it's really about thinking, sort of defining what MillerKnoll is. And it's been evolution. And so MillerKnoll Fulton Market and the project that Design Days was really a kind of a moment to kind of bring this all together. The first kind of iteration of the MillerKnoll, workspace flagship showroom was in London. Prior to that, MillerKnoll showrooms were really kind of in the background, and it was really about kind of the brands becoming the main focal point. But in MillerKnoll Fulton Market, it's really about bringing these brands to life. And so what we've kind of come to realize is that MillerKnoll really comes to life through environments and experiences. And that's how we kind of demonstrate the work. But it's also about showcasing these kind of core brands and allowing them to really shine and show the products off that they're known for. And when we think about what MillerKnoll is, it's really a place for people first. Design for the good of humankind is the mission. And what that means is that we design workplaces for ourselves. We design spaces for working, for gathering, for meeting. We also design spaces for ideas. And as a design company, it's really about becoming a showcase where we inspire customers, act as educators, and showcase kind of the innovations of our work, materials experience, product, exhibitions, curation, and storytelling. So these are all kind of the components that make up a MillerKnoll showroom. And for those of you who don't know, MillerKnoll Fulton Market, we added a new building this year. The current location is 1100. It's the first time Knoll moved from the previous building at Fulton Market into 1100. So they're on the third floor. Herman Miller, which was on the second floor, moved down to the first floor and coexists with retail. And then MillerKnoll Workspace, it's the first time that's shown up since London. So that's on the ground floor and the second floor. And then the new building, 1144, is a 3-story building that houses DWR, which used to be 1144, and then 4 showrooms for Hey Muto, MillerKnoll Healthcare, and Not One. It's about a 2-minute walk, but so it's really about thinking about as a campus overall. It's not about one individual showroom or one individual building. It's really about a collective experience. And so we've been, over the course of this past year, it's really been asking, how does MillerKnoll show up? And that's what we're, answering and through this design. So this is 1100, and I think what's important is that, throughout all these spaces, which there are many spaces, about 77,000 square feet, 9 individual showrooms, 2 retail spaces. It all kind of starts at the front door of 1100, where there's you're greeted into this MillerKnoll reception space, which coexists on the same floor as Herman Miller. It's actually kind of a complex interweaving of all these different showrooms. This is showing the floor plan. This is the kind of MillerKnoll welcome space reception area, which houses both a reception area, a kind of lounge hosting space, and an exhibition space. And when we think about MillerKnoll reception, it's really the landing page. It's the first place you go, orient yourself, place to kind of gather, a place that's meant to be inspiring, and also a place to showcase ideas. This is that reception desk. And I think one of the things that we've been working a lot, Gabriel and I and the interiors team have been thinking about is, when you design for MillerKnoll, you're working with, over 15 brands from this brand collective, including Datesweiser, Spinneybeck, vocabulary to kind of play and whatnot. So here you see this entrance with the Datesweiser desk. you see the Knoll Barcelona bed, and the Nelson lamp, kind of the two kind of iconic elements from these brands kind of coming together. And this is that sort of first hosting space. It's a Dateswiser desk. We had a lot of fun kind of working with these brands, which can do things like highly customizable, but also bringing together products like the Muto Connect sofa, Geiger sled chairs. So it's really about kind of working with this vocabulary and kind of trying to create something that both defines MillerKnoll, but also kind of gives a nod to the past and gives a nod to all the different brands.
One thing that felt important in this initial space was to sort of lift up and bring forward some voices from our brand collective's history that maybe are a little bit less obvious or less known to people. So of course, you know, the Eameses or Saarinen, these are important kind of figures in the kind of brand mythology, at least of Herman Miller and Knoll, but trying to bring forward some others. So Ward Bennett was a reference here. He's the designer of those sled chairs, iconic designer, American designer of the 70s and 80s. But a lot of his furniture designs sit with Geiger. Another designer is Joe Durso, who did work for Knoll in the late 80s and then I think into the 2000s. But there's a coffee table that Knoll just reissued, but the one that we have located here in this welcome space is actually an archival piece. So one of the pieces that they went back to kind of confirm all the details and kind of refine the make of that piece. And then you can kind of see in the background that's sort of put in context with an exhibition that traces the lineage and the histories of Herman Miller and Knoll from the early 20th century up until the present, showing how those things are intertwined.
Yeah. And this exhibition, which was designed by Standard Issue, is actually a version of the exhibition that comes from the MillerKnoll archives in Michigan. That's now going to be open to the public, and that's an amazing space that has, you know, the physical archive all in one place, and an exhibition space there where you can go and see all these amazing pieces on display, curated by the MillerKnoll archivist Amy Auerscherman. So that's really kind of also one of the things that kind of always having this kind of presence of history there to kind of draw upon and pull forward into the present, which is a kind of amazing, aspect of MillerKnoll. These are some of those pieces, and our team also works on these exhibitions internally, but also with external partners. This is a space that we call the Spotlight. It's right outside of the elevator, meant to be kind of a little bit of a counterpoint to the kind of, heaviness of that kind of, these modern pieces, the kind of origins of American modern design. This is actually a display that we did called Together by Design, having these kind of figures that each of these figures uses something from all of the brand collective, all the way including Holly Hunt, Dateswiser, Spennybeck, Knoll, Herman Miller. So this is a rotating exhibition that really allows us to kind of showcase different products, different stories. Gabriel can kind of walk through the second floor, which is the MillerKnoll workplace, which is our actually hardworking work floor, but also a showroom.
Yeah. So as Chris said, this is.
Oh, wait. Did your audio cut out, Gabriel? You want me? Oops. That's just me that can't hear Gabriel. Oh. Gabriel, are you able to
See if this is any better.
Oh, that's better. There we go. That worked.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. As Chris first introduced this idea of a MillerKnoll workplace, the first iteration was in London. This Chicago blended work floor is our second evolution of this idea, and it's both a workplace that serves associates, but it's also, of course, doubles as a showroom, which brings its own unique challenges. But we wanted to approach this first as a place for our associates. So this idea for collective belonging, that would, organize the work floor based on workplace planning principles first, and kind of going off of the specific needs of our teams and how we can support that work. In terms of the materiality and the atmosphere, we're thinking about a space that's elevated yet approachable, something that is going to forward natural materials, something that's very comfortable for folks to work in, actually, and then thinking about flexibility that's grounded in specificity. So rather than this idea that providing a lot of generic space is going to somehow serve the most people the best, it's actually providing a diversity of very specific spaces and allowing for choice to support different work styles. So whether that's individual to collaborative work, or it's just supporting some people who might like to work in a very heads down way versus someone who likes to be very social in the workplace. Some of the references that we were looking at for this floor when it comes to colors or materiality, we're pulling from kind of historic references from some of our brands. So I mentioned Ward Bennett before. There's CBS offices by Florence Knoll in here, some early Herman Miller sort of ad visuals, also some early Nelson designs, the image there with the dark background and the black chair. So kind of trying to pull from the breadth of our brand collective's history, at least as an underpinning, a starting point. But like I said, really forwarding natural materials and making for a space that's very inviting and comfortable for associates. So when it comes to the workplace planning, this floor is meant to support about 50 associates, and they come from a variety of teams. So not any one team is wholly housed here, which means that a lot of people, when they're coming to the office, it's almost like they're one of a team that is otherwise dispersed remotely. And so it functions in some ways to forge connections between people who don't otherwise work together. So that's kind of one piece of this. But in approaching the planning, we were thinking about how best to distribute spaces that are individual, group, or collective. And so we have this kind of one axis that runs diagonally across the floor plate, ranging from public to much more private spaces, and then a range of more flexible and more fixed work points. And so the blue is looking at really community program. That's kind of a community cafe. It serves both as a social space, a place that you might have kind of a serendipitous interaction with a colleague, but it's also a place for group events, whether that's, say, a lunch or a catered event, or it could be for big group meetings. So there's flexibility in this space to rearrange the furniture and accommodate, say, an all hands meeting with 50 people here, all looking at one screen or attending a lecture, let's say. And then the yellow boxes indicate individual work. So looking at prioritizing individual work along the perimeter. So we're seeing a trend with much less private office oriented along the perimeter in office spaces now, just given that companies are spending less on office space in general, and so footprints are shrinking. And so the priority is often given to open office along the perimeter. And then we have a row of private offices in numbers 9 and 8 that you can see back along the back edge. And then the pink or red boxes indicate spaces for group or collaborative work. Just looking at the plan, you can sort of see how these neighborhoods play out. So again, this is not organized by team. It's really organized in a way that supports relationship-based work. So thinking about whether the relationships between the individual and the collaborative spaces, how to think about visual separation, acoustic separation, things like that. But you'll notice that there are a number of ways that we're dividing space without using hard architecture. So leaning into various different product solutions that kind of can solve issues that I'm sure folks are facing in client work now in designing office spaces where there's maybe a need to provide some sort of separation, but there isn't necessarily there aren't the resources to support a full, say, architectural renovation of a space. So this is a view looking at the cafe, and this is a place that brings together ancillary product from pretty much across our whole collective. And so this was trying to prove out that we can convincingly and successfully mix product from all the brands, whether that's sort of at the very high end of our price point and high end of our collective with Dateswiser or with Geiger, down to maybe more accessible product, more contemporary product coming from Hey, Not One, Muto, mixed in also with classics from Herman Miller and Knoll, and then bringing in also architectural finishes from Spinneybeck and Filsfeld. But you'll see the products in this photo that serve that sort of architectural in-between scale are on the left-hand side, a product, Rockwall Creative Wall from Knoll, that can provide a solution that is both kind of architectural in scale, but also clad in Filsfeld. So there's like acoustic property there. And then likewise for the wood wall that you see in the background, this is coming from Spinneybeck. And again, it's an acoustic product, thinking about how to make this social space maybe not distract the rest of the floor plate too much, and provide the right level of visual barrier and sort of architectural enclosure. These are, again, some of those references thinking about the flexibility of, say, this Ward Bennett image with a table on wheels that can move around and serve different configurations in a space. So we've got tables on casters in this cafe, and then leaning into some of these darker, more natural materials like you see in the Nelson image in the center, and mixing those with some classics. In general, we're interested in the way that these spaces can combine to create something bigger than just a sea of product. So how can we combine them in ways that feels very intentional, very at times architectural, and pair them with finishes that bring about a total environment rather than sort of product on display. One other choice that we made here that makes a big impact in terms of both atmosphere but also planning had to do with a floor finish change. So we introduced a cork floor leaning into a natural material, something, you know, that is sustainable, it's warm, has great acoustic properties, it's soft underfoot, and that this can signal a different behavior in the floor plate. So people sort of subtly understand that there's a different way to behave in this space versus the rest of the work floor. Here's a view of a work lounge. So this is a modular sofa that has different settings on each side. So sometimes it allows for touch-down work or small meetings or for more collective social interaction. So it kind of serves as almost like a park in the center of the floor plate. This is furthest from the windows, kind of buried in the center, but provides this sort of island around which to congregate. One thing to point out has to do with the way we thought about styling this space. We were pretty intentional about all of the artwork that appears on the walls. These are photographs by a photographer named Naho Kubota, who's an architectural photographer. She does documentary photography for many architects. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her work. She's someone that Chris and I had worked with extensively at Leong Leong to document a lot of our projects. But she's also has a fine art practice. And so these are photos that she took sort of with her artist hat on of the TWA terminal by Saarinen just in the week prior to its renovation. And it was nice to kind of bring this kind of contemporary lens on some of these elements that connect to our brand heritage, while also literally pulling forward also photographs from our archives by Balthazar Korab and also Herbert Matter. So trying to make this link between sort of the past and the present and maybe also the future. Naho, in addition to providing the particular prints for the showroom, she also actually took documentary photographs of the space. So a lot of the photos in this deck actually come from Naho as well. So kind of interesting to continue that collaboration with her. This is showing a materials experience. This is a place where we can house the breadth of our CMF offering across all of our brands. And one thing we were debuting in Chicago was a central palette. So this is a palette of CMF options that span across brands. So on the left-hand side, you see this breadth of veneers, laminates, powder-coated finishes that can be applied across our systems furniture, for example. We're also showing Knoll and Maharam textiles, and basically making a really dedicated showcase for the materiality of our product, because that's part of what makes it so versatile. But we have some really beautiful things to display there, and this becomes a tool both for our associates, but also I think for sales teams and customers. There are a number of private offices also on this floor. I won't spend too much time on these, but we made an effort to show a variety of products, but also figure out how best to serve our associates. So, for example, the private office on the right-hand side is a hybrid private office and meeting room, and this is something that kind of serves a dual need, where it could be, you know, somebody working in here all day and kind of flexing between individual work at a desk and then turning around and pulling a chair over to a meeting space with a few people. But this is something that, you know, speaking to that idea of variety, that we have a variety of spaces that can serve different needs, different work styles. And then in the open desking, we likewise have a variety of options. Some is more fixed and some is more flexible. So on the left-hand side, you see some of our more flexible work points, our OE1 system. And then on the right-hand side, these are more fixed work points for teams that are dedicated to, you know, specific tasks that sit in the same place each day. And so there's a chance to choose between, say, a hot desk or a place that you might come in and work for a few hours and move around the floor plate, or a place that you would be situated all day long. And then last, speaking to this idea of specificity and offering variety, a need that we identified for our associates was this need for heads down work. And in an open office, it can be hard to find focus. And I think also people working from home find it difficult to focus on certain types of tasks that really require kind of shutting out other inputs and really focusing. So we took on the challenge of designing a series of spaces that could accommodate that need. And something we thought was really critical to solving this problem was also providing a varying degree of sort of control over the space. So giving people a number of touch points that allows them to customize their experience in the space, whether that's height adjustable desk. We have the lighting on dimmers. Each room is individually controlled. There are in some cases there are tack boards or whiteboards, so you can have a place to you know, be sort of workshopping on your own. There are hooks for hanging belongings. There are all kinds of different sort of metrics within these spaces that allow for individual customization, which is super important in an open office setting like this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we encounter designing spaces for ourselves is something that you might experience in the A&D community for yourselves, or also for your clientele, which is, you know, where's the kind of future of work going? You know, what are the kind of challenges of you know, designing for back to work, designing for hybridity? These are all things that we're also grappling with and you know, working with and experimenting with in our own spaces.
And it seemed clear that there are certain things that you can solve by, say, thoughtfully dividing space and planning out adjacencies in the open office, but there are certain things that require actually built architecture. So realizing when we need to invest in that sort of build out versus when we can rely on other smart planning principles to solve for relationships in the workplace.
So as we mentioned, you know, there's 9 showrooms overall at MillerKnoll Fulton Market. And so in addition to the MillerKnoll workspaces, you know, the kind of 2 anchor spaces are the Herman Miller space, the Knoll space, which is cohabitating in this building for the first year, and then Geiger, Datesweiser, and Maharam above. For Herman Miller, we were really leaning into performance seating this year, and creating a showcase for that as a leader in seating, but also trying to think about architecturally, like how we can think about space and using architecture as an organizer. This floor houses both contract furniture and retail. So, given that Herman Miller is thinking about the kind of evolution of both lifestyle and work, it made a lot of sense to bring them together. And the hinge, so to speak, that connects both of these is seating. And so this is the kind of it's almost like a kind of vessel or platform that you can access through retail into the performance seating lab, but also go directly into contract. So it's both kind of an architectural device, but also a kind of experiential device. Here you can see the kind of Herman Miller retail section with the seating lab beyond through the road polycarbonate. And this is a view of Herman Miller contract.
This is an image of the Knoll showroom. This is a space where we were collaborating not only with Jonathan Olivares, who's creative director at Knoll, but also with architect Pernilla Orstedt and textile and color designer Salem Vanderswag. So this was a great opportunity to engage in that collaborative process and bring in some other voices to work together on a brand vision. And those two that I mentioned, Pernilla and Salem, have also been integral in working with Jonathan on developing product. So the big story this year at Knoll was a launch of Skyline, which is a new product. But one thing to maybe mention that's specific to Knoll and the kind of history of Knoll, starting with Florence Knoll herself, is this idea that Knoll product is planned very closely in concert with the surrounding environment context. And so the product and the architectural finishes in the space kind of speak really closely to each other. And so in this case, there were certain modifications made to this envelope to really make the product shine. In part, this was through a silver paint that was hand applied. We worked through very particular techniques with a specialty painter. Likewise, we painted the floor. Wood floors were painted gray, but this created for an environment that was both sort of diffuse and abstract with a really beautiful light quality with these silver walls. But it also sort of makes a quietness that allows the product to shine. This is a view of the sort of pavilion space, an extension of the showroom here. So this is showing more of like a modernist kind of curtain wall, typical office environment. But the thing that we're looking at here is Skyline product, which is this new product that is very architectural in the way that it comes together. It has certain datums that are very established across the systems furniture and the ancillary. So you'll see that the heights of, say, the blue settee on the left-hand side and the private office beyond, those things align. And then likewise, there are datums that align at the level of, say, table height or the backs of the sofas, things like that. So the system has both ancillary and systems furniture that work really closely together and can make for very architectural composition. So the play here is how to kind of marry the architecture of the space and the architecture of the systems themselves. These are just some details showing some nice CMF combinations. So on the left-hand side, there are a number of different materials coming together that all play really nicely in a tonal way. So this is something that Knoll excels at, and something that, in deciding on the palettes for this space, we were wanting to really flex on. So there's a mix of metallic powder coats, wood grain laminates, actual wood veneers, and then we also have upholsteries that sort of work really closely into this system to make a super rich and very refined tonal environment. We'll touch on quickly some other brand moments. Something exciting happening at Geiger this year in Chicago was the launch of a new chair, the Line Chair by Carol Byings. Really exciting Dutch designer, made a beautiful range of furniture all in wood. So I think her challenge and her mission was to kind of showcase just best in class fabrication of solid wood furniture. So this is one, that's treated with a paint finish and upholstered, but this comes in a whole range of finishes, and work together with Carl not only to compose the showroom and the launch of the product, but also on the design of the scenography for the showroom. Here is a system designed by Leon Ransmeyer for Maharam. Again, working with an outside designer to come up with a unique solution, something that is, I know that Maharam has collaborated with Leon on multiple projects in the past. This was just a really beautiful system of stainless steel posts that intersected in a very particular tectonic way to create an infrastructure that was sort of fluid and flexible for showcasing these beautiful some are new and some are reissued fabrics by Maharam. I also love the bench that you see in the foreground kind of running across the frame. That's just two of these posts paired together.
And then new, in addition this year to the MillerKnoll Fulton Market was 1144, a 3-story timber frame building, and the ground floor of it is the occupant is DWR, which moved over from 1100, and then 2 floors of showrooms above. This is a pretty unique space in that there's also a courtyard to the left, which I'll show in a second. But we also, our team worked on the DWR store design and then collaborated with the brands on the showrooms, which Gabriel can kind of mention.
Yeah, so housed in this building are showrooms for some of our ancillary brands. So Hey being one, and working with them was exciting to bring their vision for the first time to a US showroom. This is the first presence that they have specifically in the United States for a contract showroom. And in this case, we were working with really simple industrial materials that come from Europe, something that they've used in the past in, say, Hay House in Copenhagen at their headquarters or in some other showroom design. So figuring out how to translate that design language to a showroom here. But the spaces on the top floor of this building have really beautiful skylights. Daylight is super nice here. But yeah, working with a really simple system of materials. These are thermal bricks made by a German manufacturer that just stack together really nicely and have a beautiful texture and a warmth to them. And then those are paired with these standard metal studs that come from Denmark, and they have a sort of an ingenious little system for fabricating a jig that these slot into, and it's super quick to assemble these walls in a showroom context. Another brand housed here is Muto. So likewise, another Danish brand. We work together closely with their design team to implement some of their design principles that really come down to material and color. They're kind of pioneering this idea of neuroaesthetics as it relates to not only color, but light, access to nature, or the way that they layer, say, like florals into many of their spaces, thinking about also sensory inputs like sound and touch and things like that. So it was an interesting opportunity to kind of learn from the principles that they're developing through their own product designs and some of their spaces in Europe, to apply that here as well. We also worked with Not One to implement a showroom for them in Fulton Market. The main sort of brief here, working together with the Not One team, was to sort of lead with an experience that was going to make an impact and sort of tell a story outside of just product. And so there was an idea to carve out this kind of proscenium space specifically for an exhibition that can change year to year, but that it's the first thing that greets you upon entering the space. So before you actually see any of the product settings and the traditional showroom space, that you're greeted with an exhibition. So we collaborated with an outside designer, Jessie Baxa, and her studio called Ref, based in LA, to develop this exhibition. And this was about this idea of infinite possibility, talking about the way in which not one products can be customized, but also pointing out sort of the trajectory of their 20-year history. They were marking a 20-year anniversary this year. And I think it communicates some of the playfulness and irreverence of this brand. But something kind of interesting and cool that we worked through on this exhibition in particular was the use of a special paint called a Musso paint. And it's this black pigment that absorbs light in a really incredible way. And so it sort of distorts your perception of depth and really hit home this idea of like an infinite space, this like zero gravity kind of outer space vibe. Otherwise, through the showroom, there were some new products that we were featuring. One that I think we're super excited that launched. It's called Mimo. It's the sofa system you see here. It's modular, has really tight lines. They do a good job of generally solving for doubling up legs at each module. So they've minimized that as much as possible. The structure is very clean. And then it has corresponding side tables that sort of lock into that modular system, and also coffee tables that are very low. And then likewise, there's the Fin chair, which is this lounge chair on the left. Both of these products are by Keiji Takeuchi, Japanese designer. And yeah, just exciting to be showing brand new product that I think we're excited to use in our own spaces, but I think A&D customers hopefully are into as well. Another piece to this building is a showroom dedicated to MillerKnoll healthcare product. And this is actually a super exciting space to be working in. I know that MillerKnoll has a strong legacy of innovation in healthcare design, starting with Herman Miller and some systems developed back in the 70s by Probst, Kostruck, and others. But we also have contemporary systems furniture. We have really amazing seating, and to be able to show our innovation and leadership in healthcare in one space in Chicago is really exciting.
And then one of the things that we have also at 1144, we've tried to use all the interstitial spaces, not just as kind of transitional spaces, but also as exhibition spaces. So just as you're getting off the elevator at 1144, we have these sort of micro galleries. And for design days, we showcase a sustainability exhibition called A Million Choices, which really talks about the kind of three pillars of circularity, carbon, and materiality, and different ways that MillerKnoll is kind of trying to push the boundaries of that. But these are also tied to the showroom. So on the left, kind of showcasing the healthcare chair that shows interchangeability with those parts. Part of this is circularity story, or biofoam that's used in the Not One Ottoman, or eelgrass, which is the spinning back product that we've actually been using in different applications in our showrooms. And then lastly, I think one of the really unique things about this project overall was that, I mentioned this courtyard, and we were fortunate to work with Michael Van Valkenburg Associates, who actually has a history with MillerKnoll and had designed a landscape space in Canton, Georgia for Herman Miller, also working on the Obama library in Chicago, and personally worked on this project. And that was, I think, one of the really, really awesome experiences that I had over the past year in working with Michael Van Valkenburg and his team. But it's sort of a pocket park here. And I think what's interesting is that, it's in itself as a kind of in a room, and I think as a furniture company that focuses a lot about interiority, it's also, sustainability and the kind of environment is also a really important aspect of the work that we do. And so I think it's it was really great to have this space of kind of a sanctuary of kind of nature, and it's kind of mini forest. That's the first kind of entry point as you go into these showrooms. This is a view from the elevator looking out, where you can see the eelgrass, spinning back eelgrass product used in the baffle above. But it kind of has this kind of natural, um, uh, quality to it as you're looking out. It kind of melds with the natural brick and the floor, looking out into this kind of eastern pine forest. And see, there's some of the kind of the other moments of that space. But it's an amazing space because when you go into it, you can actually go to the very back. It's about 100 feet deep, and you can sit in these um, uh, Bertoya chairs and look out, and actually the planting is so dense you can't actually see the street, and so all you can sort of hear are the kind of insects and the birds, and it's a kind of nice moment of kind of being in a space that's you're actually surrounded by nature, and it's a great counterpoint to the showroom spaces. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you for sharing this today. And we welcome at this time any questions or comments that you may have. We did have a couple comments about, liking this idea of adding some of the photography and some of our nod to our history into our present. So that was definitely something that was there. I see a hand raised by Benjamin, but Benjamin, we're not able to unmute you. So if you could just ask your question in the chat, I would be happy to communicate it over here. So one of the questions I have for you is, Gabriel, you talked about this sense of belonging, which is really something that lends itself to the culture here at MillerKnoll. And while a large part of your responsibility is really thinking about how our brands show up, was there opportunity throughout this process to engage directly with MillerKnoll associates? We talk about workplace here, and a big part of our spaces, our headquarters, our showrooms, our workplace, and how they serve us. Did you have some opportunity to engage with associates?
Absolutely. I think so. We have a workplace team that sits under our interiors umbrella, led by Kristen Bennett, and she and her colleagues did a whole bunch of associate surveys and kind of did the research to pull together the foundations of that workplace strategy. And from there, our team engaged further with those respondents and kind of used all of that data to put into place those initial planning principles that I was showing in some of those diagrams early on. So understanding how many people, what are their needs, how do they work together, how to accommodate these team members who are on distributed teams, that are coming into the office, and maybe they're the only person represented from their team. One of our own colleagues, Jessica Milos, is the one lone person on the design team that sits in Chicago, and so she was a little bit of a conduit for us, I think, sometimes to understand what the needs were, but really helpful to have that perspective from the people who would actually be using the space. And I think, as I mentioned, the approach was really to start from how best to create a workspace that works for contemporary work modes and what serves the way that our associates work. And then from there, figure out how to integrate product or what to show. But really, the starting point was about how to make a workspace that is forward thinking and really functional.
Thank you. One of the things I always think about is that one of our greatest strengths and one of the things we enjoy to do the most here at MillerKnoll is to really think about co-creation. When we're working with the design community, we do our best work when we co-create and we work together. And something that's unique about the space that was highlighted in Fulton Market, and that I'm assuming that we'll see as we kind of move forward, is the use of materiality that's available from the brands in an architectural way. And they were used in a very unique way here in Fulton Market, but they're not necessarily just unique in that application, meaning that they can be used in a variety of ways, specified in a variety of ways with designers. And do you have any thoughts on working with us in that capacity, how to get that started and how to drive those conversations and open the door in that capacity as we help to create great workplaces and headquarters for other corporations?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to the ways that we were working with both Dates Wiser and Spinnybeck, and we engaged them, I think, probably the way that any customer really would. We came to them with a design idea. We tried to understand from them what the capabilities were for them to make these custom elements. But basically, all to say that both of these brands actually offer very custom solutions. So they maybe have a set of known materials or certain fabrication details that they know that they can execute really well. But within that, there are sort of sky's the limit in certain ways about what they can produce in working closely with a customer or another designer. So I mentioned that sort of half wall that's in the cafe that has this kind of acoustic wood treatment. That was a piece that actually, we came to them with a design idea. We worked together on the kind of finer points of that, and then the Spinneybeck team, fabricated, delivered, and installed this piece. So it's a way to kind of work outside of a traditional like GC architect relationship, where if you're not actually planning to do full scale renovations and you don't have a GC on board, you can work with our brands to solve some of these find solutions for spatial problems. I think the same goes for Dateswiser. Chris, if you go to the slide with the materials experience, we worked with Dateswiser to make these kind of dividers, these big millwork elements that we could program differently on two sides. So we were able to inflect the spaces on either side of each of these elements with a different function. So facing into this materials experience, of course, we had different display modes for, the fabrics versus the samples, and the other side has a screen, so it's tech enabled. And then the verso of each of these units serves a different function. One has a pinup space with cork that's integrated sort of flush with the panelization of the veneer panels. Another one has wardrobes that serves for coat storage and other storage for associates. And the other side has a picture rail that supports artwork to be hung on the back of it. So kind of leveraging these pieces and customizing them in a way that provided actually a lot of variety in terms of how we were able to inflect the adjoining spaces.
I think we actually learned a lot in working with these brands about what the potentials were. And I think, when we think about these spaces, one of the things you always have to think about is boundary and kind of like organizing. And so going from the kind of workplace strategy and thinking about how do we create neighborhoods, but creating boundaries without, doing hard walls, we found that, there are a lot of products like the Spinneybeck ductile wall that Gabriel mentioned, but also Rockwell Creative Wall, which actually has a lot of flexibility and creates like a nice boundary and has a lot of capabilities with materiality. So using custom Spinneybeck materials on the inside, you can actually create things that feel very architectural. So I think there are actually a lot of things that we kind of learned and are continuing to kind of push and thinking about some of the next, showroom workspaces using a lot of these products.
Yeah, and I'll just say, last thing to maybe say is that the level of craft and fabrication that comes out of these brands is super top notch. And I would say that, very candidly, any elements that we made through a millworker in the GC versus elements made with Dateswiser, there was night and day difference. That the Dateswiser elements had the precision of furniture, of sort of like engineered factory made furniture, but made totally custom to our spec, where we ended up with a bunch of issues, of course, coordination issues, all kinds of issues working through the GC's millworker. So just knowing that there's a reliability of the track record and years of experience making this stuff, that they're just so expert at, they know the materials really well, they have the best veneers, they've engineered these things, so it's just a different level. So
one of the favorite spaces in the MillerKnoll floors, I know, was the deep focus work area. And there is a question here from one of our viewers that did we use branded materials in that space, and how did we use those architectural materials in that focus area?
Yeah, that's actually using Spinneybeck felt product on the walls. We knew we wanted to create something that was sound dampened, and so that was the original thought, was to work with Spinneybeck And so yeah, all the walls in that space are using product.
Another interesting aspect that you touched on today was this idea of exhibition space. And you mentioned an exhibition space we now have in West Michigan, and also touched a little bit on the exhibition spaces that we have here in Fulton Market. And can you elaborate a little bit more on the intention of these spaces and how they might show up as we look at future spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the kind of core elements of a lot of the showrooms that we're thinking about is having an exhibition component. And I think what exhibitions enable us to do is really think about, ideas, innovation, and also kind of like design. And so, and in this case, kind of highlighting design legacy, which I think I think when we think about, well, what's the future of work, I think there's always this question of like, well, where have we come from? And so I think with such a deep catalog and deep archive, that's one of the things that we can work with in these exhibition spaces. In the previous showroom space in New York, in her Miller space, there was a roadie exhibition because there was a release of some new Gilbert roadie products. So I think there's always a kind of like new products kind of being reissued, and there's always this kind of thinking about both the past and the kind of future and where we're headed. But I think the exhibition spaces are also opportunities to like show new ideas and sort of be experimental, which I think is something we always need to hold, is that we can't just only be thinking about the past, but there's a kind of way in which we want to like be playful, be experimental.
And how do you bring that all together? And I know in West Michigan, as we have this expansive archival, on the opposite side of the state at Cranbrook, there is an exhibition, Everything Eventually Connects, that is also celebrating the brands, our history, and kind of our DNA, and how we take that forward. So if you have an opportunity as a viewer to be in Michigan through September, that would be on exhibit there, as well as you could visit us in West Michigan to see our public display of our archival there. One last question. What was your most challenging or favorite, maybe most rewarding aspect of this project?
Gabriel, do you want to start?
I think the most rewarding has been to feel like or to hear feedback from folks both internally and externally that they understand what MillerKnoll is much better through these series of spaces, whether that's from our blended work floor that shows all the product together, that serves our associates, that kind of cinches together a lot of the ideas that we're talking about, or looking at the entire project and seeing the level at which all the brands show up, the strength of the exhibitions, the storytelling, that in total there's kind of a new paradigm, I guess, for how to see what kind of environments and experiences MillerKnoll can bring to life.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like, I think with MillerKnoll and the whole brand collective, like, there's so much possibility, and I think that is one of the inherent challenges of how we bring things together. So I think it is really rewarding to kind of like be able to create a space that allows MillerKnoll to come to life through the environment, but also to have a space that we ourselves are able to work out of and actually enjoy and to some extent critique, and then kind of keep evolving, because I think that's what keeps things fresh and keep things interesting when you're designing for yourself and also for others. That's the best way. Like, we're our toughest critic, and I think also where we get to sort of experiment and explore. It's really rewarding.
Well, thank you. We are at time today. We appreciate your time sharing these insights. For our audience members, we do post each one of our design perspectives on YouTube. We've had some questions about this, so if you'd like to go back and rewatch or watch and share, please do. We welcome your comments and your questions, and we welcome you to visit us at any one of our spaces around the country, around the globe. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.